Thanks. Oh, hi Mario. Wow. People are saying hello from a lot of places. Okay, I think I can start. Hello everyone, and thanks for joining me. For those of you who are here live, welcome to Tasmania. It's 6 o'clock in the evening, and it's already getting very dark. We're going into autumn down here. My name is Heidi, and I work for Aurora Expeditions and sometimes for G Adventures. And today I'm going to talk about going for a walk, leading a walk. And this is really from a naturalist's perspective, especially when we're going somewhere we haven't been before. So you've just landed somewhere that you haven't actually been in this exact location. When Lauren and I started talking about doing a talk, when she asked me to give a talk in this series, we reminisced a little bit about a walk that we had done together in East Greenland a few years ago. And it was a challenging walk, not physically challenging. It wasn't like we were hiking up a mountain or anything. But it was late in the trip. It was the last couple of days of a fairly long trip of a few weeks. And it was a wet day. I think from memory, it drizzled the entire time we were walking. And I think we had a few serious downpours in there as well. So it was more of a challenge to keep people engaged for a few hours of a walk in the tundra at the end of a trip where they've already seen their highlights for the trip. But just really keeping them engaged in the location. You know, the way people sort of start thinking about onwards travels at the end of their trip. But we really wanted to keep them on site sort of thing. And I don't remember the specifics of what we talked about on that hike, but in the end, the time flew. We had a lovely time. We talked about some great stuff, and we all came back to the ship feeling satisfied. We'd given everyone a great experience. We had kept them in the moment, and we were completely soaked. But it was more about the substance of the walk. We felt like we had done a good job. So I'm going to talk to you today about leading a walk, and basically sort of talk through some of my thought process of looking at a walk in a new site and having a good time with people. And again, this is from a naturalist perspective. So if you're with a group of mountaineers or super athletic people, and you might have a mandate to get to the highest point of land for a bit of elevation in your time allocated. But I'm talking about a walk where there's a bit more substance to it, a bit more meat and bones to the interpretation, perhaps. And kind of like David talked about in his interpretation talk the other day, which is great. We want a narrative arc. I want to take you on a walk where there's some substance and structure to it. You know, we're going to have a natural highlight to the walk and follow a narrative arc, as it were. So all my examples are going to be Arctic, because I think there's a little bit more scope for this kind of sort of exploration, a brand new landing site in the large geographical area that we operate in the Arctic, more so than the Antarctic, but a similar sort of process can be used in both locations. And when you travel to a new landing site, some of them are going to have more zing than others. Some of them are going to be more exciting. Some of them might sort of make you come back to the ship and go, wow, we should really tell the EL not to bother with this site again. And I'm sure everybody can sort of think about an example of a hike you've done and it wasn't your favorite. In fact, maybe you have one that you think back and go, oh, no. You can probably bond over that and comment and leave a location if you remember one of those. But there's some repeated sites that we go to again and again because we know the highlights and they're good. But I love the opportunity to go to a new landing site. It really sort of excites me to go somewhere that you've never been and just have an explore and take a group of people with you. So we're gonna go on a walk, and I'm gonna use Palanderbukta in Svalbard as an example. Simply because I've been there and landed on 4 completely different locations, probably because of different expedition leaders at the time. And the same task has been applied each time. Heidi, take a group, go for a hike, go for a walk, have a good time. And on one occasion, especially, I remember a firearms manager coming up and giving me a friendly sort of fist bump on the arm with a sort of funny comment like, oh, polar desert sounds about as interesting as a walk in the parking lot, you know, have fun out there. And we did have fun out there and we had lots to talk about. And so what is the process that I went through on this particular occasion to try and have a great walk that had some sort of natural storyline to it? We all wish that every hike had some spectacle of wildlife, like, you know, Arctic foxes performing in front of our eyes, but we all know that doesn't happen at every landing, does it? Sometimes you just got to get out there and spend some lovely time in that environment. So luckily, on all occasions in both companies I work with, I'm usually part of the team that goes ashore early to scout for polar bears. And this gives me the opportunity to look at the landscape and come up with a plan A, even if it's, you know, I've only seen this place from the bridge of a ship and that's it. But depending on the scale of the operation, this scouting might take several minutes, it might take half an hour. And that gives me a chance to sort of have a look at the lay of the land and come up with at least a vague plan A, where I'm going with these people. So on this one particular moment in Palanderbukta, I'm heading up to a fairly, at least some sort of height of land to scout and scan for bears. And when I'm up there and I'm looking with my binoculars, scanning the landscape, I can see some dirty white thing much higher up the ridge line. It gets your heart going for a moment, but it's not a bear on this occasion. It's what looks like bone, some sort of whale bone. And so my naturalist brain thought, right, cool, that's going to be one of our destinations, one of our goals on this walk. So when I meet my group of guests on the beach and I give them their briefings, safety talk about bears, all these things, I can kind of give them a vague plan A and tell them that, you know, this is an exploratory place. And I gave them a bit of instruction and I said, we're in a polar desert. There's not heaps of vegetation underfoot. So this is your chance to look for fossils. And I got them looking for fossils instead of me because I don't want to stare at the ground when I do want to actually pay attention in case there's bears and look at the landscape more than my feet. But it also gives them a chance for discovery. If one of them finds a fossil that we can all talk about, that's really great. And then we head off to that bone. And in this instance, it was a bowhead skull, which is just a gold mine on a walk. It's well away from the water, so it gives a great opportunity to ask people what they think moved it that far from the water, but also talk about ice ages and the coming and going of glaciers, isostatic rebound and geological time. And then, of course, we can look for things like the wonderful plants. You usually see good plants around an old bone like that because of extra nutrients, etc., etc. So that was our sort of first stop on the walk. And from there, I'm sort of scanning the landscape some more. And in this particular location, there is not a big, beautiful, complicated, tumble-down glacier, but just where the ice just really on the top of the ridge sort of just petered out, thinned out, and died. And anytime a group of non-mountaineers, us mere mortals, can get to the edge of a bit of ice, I feel like that's a real highlight for just the average people, for them to be able to Hi, Renato. For them to be able to stand on the edge of glacier ice, because we're not going to get to somewhere really with crazy ice topography. That's always a highlight. So it's a good place, obviously, for a panoramic view. They can see the ship down in the fjord and the landscape around us. But also it's a chance to sort of have some of those conversations, or at least segue into Colby's epic recap that's coming later, on those big topics, because we're standing on the edge of a bit of dying ice, perhaps. Talk about climate change, that big elephant in the room we should talk about more often, or at least talk about, melting ice at the very least, and have our quiet moment in this incredible landscape anyways. And then from here, I hate to retrace my steps exactly back to the landing site if I can help it. So I'm scanning the landscape a bit more, and I can see further away from our exact landing site a place where previous water has cut through the little bank above the beach. Probably water that melted from when this ice that we're standing next to extended further along this peninsula. So it talks a little bit more about the coming and going of ice ages, etc. And anytime there's a cut through something like that, it might bring out slightly different geology, different chance for fossils. Maybe there's a plant hiding in that little refugia against the wind, perhaps. So that was our next sort of destination, to make it a bit of a circuit back to our landing site. So before you know it, a few hours have passed in this excursion. We've walked a nice distance, depending on our people. We've seen some real highlights. What is my sort of take-home message about my thought process on this particular walk, and on a lot of walks? My super nerdy biology brain, on every walk, just wants to identify every species that I see, whether it's birds, especially plants, lichens. Turns out it doesn't make for very good interpretation. In fact, it's not really interpretation, that's just commentary, isn't it? But when I start planning a hike and thinking about how it all comes together, remember that sort of narrative arc, I actually have to think about much bigger landscape changing sort of phenomenon, I guess. So that's my big take-home message, is use a narrative through the landscape and all those lovely species and examples of fine detail to flesh it out in a way. And so what are those big landscape shaping phenomenon that I sort of try and think about and have as a running topic through the walk? The most obvious everywhere we operate is glaciation, of course. Doesn't matter which pole you're at or where we are, there will be evidence of how these places have shaped our topography and changed the geography of where we are. So that's obviously a great topic to sort of thread through the whole thing, but also past glaciation as well. Evidence of changed ice ages, changed glacial presence over the millennia. That's a nice topic to talk about over an entire landscape. I'm not a geologist, so I can never remember if I'm walking on Jurassic sediments or perhaps something as old as Precambrian. I always have to remind myself right before a walk or ask the geologist. But big landscape shifting type geological time geology. The land we're standing on right now, the continent or island group, where does it come from? Where is it going? Has it just ripped off of a supercontinent in its past? Has it had some other plate smash into it and throw up mountains? I get it, more rocks. Or has it just drifted from the tropics up to these high latitudes? And for me, because I'm not a geologist, so I can't get into the real specifics, but I think that the broad brushstrokes of knowledge are really important to read these landscapes and to give us context for it all. You know, if one of my people finds a fossil, and they will in a lot of these places, is it a marine invertebrate or is it a tropical fern? And that, let's talk about where these continents have moved and how. So that's the second, I guess, general landscape theme that I like to sort of keep track of while I'm on these walks. And the third, and possibly one of my favorites, is only going to really happen in the Arctic. But of course, I'm talking about permafrost, the active layer, how it shapes everything we can look at in a tundra scene, from the flora on a continental scale to beautiful sorted sediments and rock types and shapes and sizes to pattern ground and polygons, and then how the flora reacts to those little microhabitats. So these are three big themes, and there's other examples, but I'm trying to not go on too long. But these are three big themes that I try and thread through a whole walk, or a combination of them through a whole walk. And like I said, then use my little species examples to flesh out some of this theme throughout the walk. And that's, I guess, my big take-home message. What is my big overall storyline for my walk? And what features in the landscape can we visit on the way to telling that story? And what examples of species can flesh it out to talk about what will we actually encounter? And we can always hope for those performing Arctic foxes to come on every single walk, but they're not going to happen on every walk. And a lot of it is just we got to spend the time out there and put ourselves in the path of the magic and see what does happen. So that's me taking you for a walk and explaining my thought process on how I plan a walk, especially somewhere where I've had about 20 minutes to come up with that plan, as opposed to, you know, the good solid repeat sites we go to where we know the plan. We've got it organized. We know, you know, the hazards and the highlights. This is hence the title, Winging It. And I got a great question from Lauren. How do you decide how often to stop along a walk for interpretation? Any thoughts on managing? Sorry, you guys can all see this, so I shouldn't. How often do you stop for interpretation? How long is a bit of string, right? Depends on your group. If you know you've got the slower walkers on your voyage, you're going to stop more often. I guess that depends on how the pace they want to walk. Are you trying to go for distance? Are you trying to get to that highlight, you know, whether the whale skull was too far away, or you knew you could get people to touch glacier ice? If only you could just get all the way there. It just depends on the people. And it also probably depends on, there's lots of variables. Where are we in the voyage? Are these people on the end 2 days of their 2-week trip? So they've been given a lot of information over the time. How often you talk might depend on how much they've already received and how receptive they are, and how you know how well they're tracking with keeping engaged. And I think this is a comment rather than a question from Kevin, but approaching wildlife. I think we could probably give an entire talk on approaching wildlife and viewing it, but I'm viewing my walk strategy at the moment as any wildlife encountered is a bonus and not a necessarily planned thing that's going to happen. You know, more serendipity. You know, obviously on some walks, the wildlife sighting is a goal because you know it's something you're likely to encounter. I'm sort of talking more about, you know, those serendipitous walks where you don't know what's going to happen. We're just sort of coming up with a plan A. The vague plan A approach is what I'm trying to talk about. To teamwork. Oh, it's amazing when you can have more than one naturalist on a walk. And can you agree on the arc before or wing it? I guess this depends on, have you traveled with that naturalist? Do you have a relationship with that other interpreter, especially if you have different fortes? The geologist comment, I'd like to have a geologist on every walk I go on. You know, I'll cover the plants if you want to cover the rocks. I think it'd be a great team. And I think there's some great scope for tag teaming two people on a walk. And in that precious few minutes when you're scanning the landscape and coming up with your vague plan A, and this happens quite often when, you know, you might have one of you might be tailing Charlie and one of you might swap through who's leading halfway through the walk. But, you know, in that few minutes, I think we're going to go to the whale skull and then we might try over there and then maybe we can come back here. And do you want to talk about, you know, of course there's time to try and plan that. But in an ideal world, we'd have it all sussed out before we head off. But I think we all find that more often than not, we are kind of winging it on these exploratory walks. And I love these opportunities. They're some of the they're some of the best moments, I think. And like I said, some locations might not have the zing as the others, but the chance to go to somewhere new is really what sort of keeps me thriving out there. That's for sure. Um, and and keeps me wanting to explore. And a great comment: using a team is always better than a solo performer. And because we all have a strength, you know, a great team is going to build each other's strengths, especially when we're going somewhere kind of new like that. Some great comments and questions here, folks. I love the camaraderie around this. So thanks for coming on a walk to Philander Bookdale with me. It was a bit of a walk down memory lane in a way for me. I'm a Canadian living in the Southern Hemisphere, and I guess I'm mourning because I'm officially canceled my Arctic season. So I'm kind of going to miss that exploratory walk in the tundra. So it was nice for me to sort of think through that process and relive it with everyone. And I'll kind of linger because I love any questions and comments as they're coming in real time. Thanks to Lauren for putting these quick chats together, for facilitating this. It's a great idea and a great chance to show some camaraderie and talk about some great topics, I think. For hosting these and facilitating these. We're all a bit of Luddites trying to use this new platform, so that's really great. And if there aren't any more pressing questions, I can keep chatting on the chat as well. I feel like I'm just sort of reliving all the glory of this teamwork here. Lots more of these chats coming up. Next Thursday, this coming Thursday is the next one, and I hope you're all looking forward to it as much as I am. Thanks everyone, and stay safe, stay well, stay sane, and good luck to you all through all of this craziness in the world.